I currently work with the Green Party of New York State. I'm a member of the state committee, and I'm an activist with the Green Party of Brooklyn. And I worked on Howie Hawkins' Green Party campaign for governor last year. And prior to that, as Monica mentioned, for like 6 or 7 years, I ran with Reverend Billy in the Church of Life After Shopping and learned so much working with that group and had a wonderful time. And in that, one of the reasons I wanted to put this panel together was because in that transition from the Reverend Billy crew to the Green Party, I wanted to keep doing creative actions and using humor, but was working with a very different community. And that Reverend Billy, as many of you know who have seen his stage performances or have seen him in the streets, he is a very talented performer and has dedicated his life to his craft. And so working with a group of people who don't have that same background, what can we do, what strengths can we draw on to also have fun and also create fun and messages that get across a political message, right? Because that's the key, is that the end is that we want to raise an issue that isn't otherwise getting covered, but also making people laugh. And I'm really glad we did this go-around, because oftentimes when I think about this, I'm thinking of it from a kind of mercenary PR perspective of like, well, we got to make them laugh so we can get headlines, so we can get attention. And that's often my initial motivation, but you've all brought up a really important point in that it's nourishing to us, I mean, as individuals and as a movement, to have a creative outlet about these issues while critiquing them and while promoting what we want our society to look at. So I am really happy that Monica and Christina are on the panel, because what I worked on with the Green Party campaign last year and what Monica does with the Bike Lane Liberation Clowns and what Christina does with Code Pink, they're all part of this creative, carnival-esque politics that has really emerged since ACT UP in the 1980s and the globalization, alternative globalization movement in the late 90s, and then in the peace movement of the early 2000s. But we're all going about it from different angles, and we're drawing on different strengths, and hopefully from the different experiences we share, you can see where you can find an entry into this way of expression and this kind of messaging. And I'm hoping that we can maybe demystify being creative. Like a lot of times activists will sit around going, we got to do an action. We want to do something creative. Or perhaps you have been identified as a creative person in your activist community. And it's like, God, we need to think of something creative. What can we do? And it's usually often paired with so that we can get young people involved. It's usually those two things, which are like often like those are important, but it's like those two different ideas kind of get mystified, and it's hard to say, well, how do we actually? What's the first step to do that? Because it can seem like a really internal, almost mystical process. So maybe by talking about what we do, not because we're like gurus at this or because there's anything special about us, but just that we've had some experiences that we've learned from, and we can share those with you. So I will start actually by talking about some of the work I did. Again, this was for a gubernatorial campaign last year. The Green Party of... Oh, okay. I'm honored that you want to watch as well. So just to give a little bit of context, to be able to get candidates on the ballot in New York State without having to file a ridiculous number of signatures from registered voters in New York State, you have to have what's called ballot status. And the way you achieve and retain ballot status as a political party is that you have to exceed 50,000 votes for governor every time there's a gubernatorial election. So you could get 1 million votes for US Senate or 1 million votes for president in New York State, would not help your ballot status at all. So running a candidate for governor is important for us, not because we necessarily think we're going to beat Andy Cuomo on election day, but because we have this other goal. So that's kind of what we were keeping in mind as we were going about this. Now the thing is, when you're a third party and you have a guy whose last name is Cuomo in New York State running for governor, and you have Carl Palladino, who, for those of you who live outside of New York State, was a really kind of sensational character and was initially a Tea Party-backed character and had a lot of juice behind his campaign, both financially because he's a millionaire, and also because he would bring baseball bats to his press conferences and things like that. So, as you have probably experienced when you're working on issues, if you're approaching the campaign from a more radical or fundamental perspective, it's hard to squeeze into the frame of the debate. So like you get recognized in that spectrum of these are the arguments being portrayed here. These are the options we should consider. And because we don't have millions of dollars to spend on TV advertisements, and because your credibility with journalists often depends on your ability to spend millions of dollars on TV advertisements, we had to really dig deep for ways to get noticed. And so I want to talk a little bit about, before I get into specific ideas that we implemented, part of this issue of like the mystification of what it means to be creative, the next question is, where do your ideas come from? I mean, you're a writer, people might ask you, where do your ideas come from? And like, well, your ideas come from you, and they come from an interrelation of all the observations and experiences and remembrances that you have stored in your head that are unique to you. Everything that, every show that you watched as a kid, or every funny experience or random experience that you've had that has happened to you out in public or whatever. When those things all start knocking around together in the different directions, and they start ricocheting in ways that are even surprising to you, that's when you're finding things that can be funny and interesting to other people as well. So the key is to get all of your memories and your half-remembered song lyrics and whatever your favorite pop culture thing of the moment, getting those things knocking around like billiard balls and tracking that and capturing that in a way so you can take an idea and move it forward into completion. So for me, because I work as a communications professional, I'm not an artist, I'm not a writer, I don't have an MFA. So the tool that I find that's really accessible to work with is mind mapping. And raise your hand if you know what mind mapping is, or have ever heard of it. Could you give just a brief explanation of what you understand mind mapping to be? Okay. What's your name again?
My name is Holly.
Holly.
I was an elementary school teacher, so we did a lot of mind mapping on the board. And I imagine there's different ways of doing it, but basically you come up with a theme and then you spider off of ideas. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So the first example I want to talk about is that we wanted our campaign to be in the East Village Halloween Parade, which is a great parade. It's like the one holiday parade that New Yorkers do for themselves, which is kind of wonderful, I think. And so we needed an idea. And so now this is the idea that we came up with. So like, how did we come up with this idea? So the way you might start a mind map is you say, okay, so Halloween. And then you start spinning off of, so what does Halloween make you think of? So, monsters, and, horror films. But, there's always a political message with the pop culture message, right? So there's also, we're talking about one of the issues of our campaign is that we need to stop the budget cuts and therefore tax the rich. So, okay, so the budget cuts. So this is another node in our mind map. So you kind of look at it and you process it for a while. Okay, well, you know, horror films, you've got slasher films like, you know, Freddy Krueger. And, you know, you're going to have a lot of junk at first, but that's okay. You're just kind of going through the junk to the idea that actually works, and you don't know when that's going to come about. But, you know, so, okay, budget cuts. We've got cutting, you got slashing. Oh, okay, so we've got slasher films over here, you know, like Halloween and, you know, Michael Myers. But, oh, we got slashing the budget. Okay, you might see where this is going. Another horror film, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Okay, so, you know, and then you kind of, it's best to take something from the different ends of like the periphery of the map that you're making. Those are often the most intuitive and not obvious connections. So you've got, we're massacring the budget. And then we've got a recognizable, you know, movie pop culture thing up here. And so that was basically the, I don't know, does that qualify as a dialectic? Are there any Marxians in here? No? Anyway, I don't know. But that was the thought process that led to that. And this is a really important thing that I want to get across, is that, like, we made this banner. We had a guy in a Cuomo mask with a knife who was chasing after people dressed as doctors and nurses and teachers. Claudia was a doctor that night. And the crowd loved it. Now, was this the best theme at the East Village Halloween Parade? Not by a long shot. But it did the job, okay? And sometimes the best idea is the idea that you can finish. And, like, you know, you might have a really pie-in-the-sky idea, and, I mean, go for that if you can, but depending on what you're trying to win, get it done, and maybe the next time around you can build that higher level or whatever. We will have a Q&A section, I promise. So this was what we did for the Halloween parade, and that was that. That's my little demonstration on mind mapping. Okay, so another instance of where we were able to use some creative thinking to get ourselves injected into the frame is, so for those of you who live in New York State, you might have heard about the squabbling between Cuomo and Palladino, Palladino attacking Cuomo's marriage, and, you know, Palladino threatening to harm on video a New York Post reporter, and it was a really lowbrow kind of moment for the campaign. And we're like trying to get some issues like, hey, we need to like hold on to the stock transfer tax money that we're taking from Wall Street every year, but gets rebated back to them. And so how do we break back into that frame? And aside from, you know, like a really structured process like mind mapping, another place where your ideas can come from is just personally what actually angers you, what riles you up. And so as a frustrated, underpaid, overworked campaign person working on a third-party campaign in New York State, I'm just like, crap, we're trying to talk about how to save our necessary social services, and the journalists of this city are treating this candidate race like a reality TV show. Oh, they're treating it like a reality TV show. So let's give them a reality TV show. And so we just kind of cranked out a press release where our candidate was, we called Carl Palladino the real candidate from Erie County, it's like the Real Housewives, blah, blah, blah. And said that Cuomo should hire Snooki as his campaign manager. And we said that Cuomo and Palladino would, they would have a, you know, Janine Garofalo says that every reality TV show ends with a hot tub. You know, they always end up in a hot tub sipping like champagne. So we gave them this image of Cuomo and Palladino toasting champagne glasses in a hot tub with Wall Street banksters. And this was what the press was hungry for in that moment. Like, they wanted more of this, and it gave them another reason to talk about that news cycle. And that's something that you can appeal to. Even if you're talking about an issue that they don't care about, if you're giving them more content, then they like that. It engages their cynical, humorous journalists who cover this stuff year after year after year. So that got press, and there were even blogs who were covering it saying, like, we know this is just the Hawkins campaign just trying to get a soundbite, but we don't care because it's so funny. And we got across what we were talking about, which was that both candidates were talking about cutting the budget. So the only way to differentiate themselves was to try to see like who was the bigger man. And so we were trying to undercut that machismo. All right, this is the last example, and this was a TV ad that we made, and we initially released it on YouTube, and the New York Post called it the best campaign ad that they'd seen, and we then recut it into a 30-second spot for upstate cable on Comedy Central to air during The Daily Show and The Colbert Report. And the thought process behind this was that, again, we were always trying to drive people back to the economy. During the Clinton campaign in the 90s, some of you might remember the catchphrase was, "It's the economy, stupid," which to me is like a really cynical and wonky and self-serving way of putting it. So I'm doing a mind map or doing a brainstorm on my whiteboard at home, I just, it's just, where are the fucking jobs? That's what people are asking. And we wanted to do a campaign spot that was funny. Our candidate, the amazing activist and candidate that he is, comedic timing is not his greatest strength. He's not a performer. And so how can we make a funny ad that draws from our strengths and draws from the strength of our message? And so we decided, well, let's not make this campaign ad about our candidate, let's make it about the people of New York. And so I'm gonna show you what that looked like.
They say the recession is over. Corporations are reaping record profits. New York wants to know.
Oh, where are the f***ing jobs?
Where are the f***ing jobs?
Where are the f***ing jobs? Where are the f***ing jobs? Where are the jobs?
Palladino and Cuomo want to throw $16 billion down the drain. Howie Hawkins wants to create a green jobs program for New York State. Vote smart. Vote green. Vote Hawkins on November 2nd.
So we put together like a Daily Show style montage, and we found dozens. I mean, we filmed 3 times as many New Yorkers as you saw there. These were just people on the street. We just went around asking people to say where are the fucking jobs. We're like, yeah, we were just talking about that. We were just talking about how there are no fucking jobs, and they were thrilled. And you saw that we had all different kinds of people who wanted to express this. And so there was a genuine yearning to get that out there. And we got the votes we needed to get our ballot status, and we went into this campaign, or we came out of the campaign stronger than we were going into it. How much these little sophomoric jokes actually contributed to it, I don't know, but I hope they helped, and people seemed to respond to them, and it certainly kept up the morale of our base. So that is the experience that I wanted to share with you folks today. And just to wrap up, it's about, again, accessing all of your unique life experiences, remembrances, occurrences, little pop culture bits that live in your head, live in each and every one of your heads, whether you think of yourself as a creative person or not. Finding a tool to access them, which is, it's not a mystical process. It's just like, get your hand writing, like it might be junk for the first 10 to 20 minutes, but you will get to something at some point. And recognize the moment that you're in. We were recognizing that we were in a very tabloid style campaign because of these 2 candidates who were just so racing to the low brow as much as they were. So we could access that in a way, but get our issues in there too in a way that we might not have otherwise. And then creating whether it's an action or a video or whatever, framing it in a way that draws on your strengths. If your idea depends on someone being a virtuoso opera soloist and you don't have a virtuoso opera soloist in your group, then that's not the best idea for you then. Choose an idea that you can get done, and then learn from that and build to the next thing. So, without further ado, I would turn on to the next panelist, either Monica or Christina, whoever wants to go. Okay.